This year I got really into Linkin Park. I listened to them a lot when I was a wee little lad, a little child, playing Call of Duty Zombies and Minecraft, and I would play alternative rock Pandora stations as I was playing my little games. However, just like most people, I kind of got older, I discovered better music, and I kind of just figured that Linkin Park was that cringe band that the emo kid listened to every time his mom told him that he couldn't go out to his friend's house. I feel like there was definitely a stigma around this band, not only like with just me in general, but also the communities of people that I surrounded myself with. But now I went back to Linkin Park, and then I ended up actually really enjoying their first two albums and just diving into the rest of their discography throughout this entire year, which is very fitting because they're releasing a new album, and that's just perfect timing to make a video about Linkin Park. This was not manufactured love for the band, because not everything that they do is good. Some of their shit is bad and some of it's ugly. All right, and I'm gonna be breaking it down for you right now in this video. I want to start off with the good. There's some general good going on here with the band, and when I say that, I mean like this is like stuff that's kind of prevalent throughout pretty much all of their releases. I think it's really cool that the band, especially as they got later on in their career, never really developed a fear to experiment a little bit. I feel like each album preceding those first two albums really kind of, is preceding the right word to use there? Each album that came after the first two albums was kind of like the band experimenting with a whole new genre and a whole new sound. And I think that part is really cool about the band, although I don't think it always worked out. You can't knock a band for trying something new, but you can knock a band for it not working out the way that they intended it to. Another thing that I think is kind of like a general good of the band is this guy named Chester Bennington, rest in peace. He is the lead vocalist of the band. He has an incredible talent for like writing these vocal melodies that are just super fucking catchy, and so like I feel like that's always a bonus for each song. Even if there's a song that I think is really not good, he kind of comes in and makes it a little bit better. 1,000 Suns, all right, this is the first album that I'm putting into the good category. 1,000 Suns is a kind of a concept album here. It's a really cool, interesting concept album. However, I feel like they lose the plot. I wish they went full into the nuclear war thing, okay? I'm really big into the idea of nuclear war in terms of like a concept. I think it's a really fascinating thing to dive into, the concept of nuclear war and what it could do to society. Not out of the case of me being psychotic and wanting it to happen, just because it's a genuine fear that I and many people in this world have, because it is a bleak reality that might come true. So I wish they would have kind of dove further into that concept in this album. I feel like they did really good with it in the first three songs and even further down the line. Throughout the middle of the album, they kind of stopped talking about like nuclear fallout, which kind of sucks in my opinion. And like I feel like there are like a couple of parts in this album that don't really feel as concept-y as Linkin Park might want to make you believe, in terms of like this is a concept album. When They Come For Me, for example, has just really weird lyrics of Mike Shinoda, like kind of talking about how we're not the same band that made Hybrid Theory anymore, yo. I'm not a monkey, I won't dance even if the beat's funky. But despite the weird, back and forth with the concept kind of happening here, this album does feel really cohesive. I think this is probably the most like front to back listenable album of Linkin Park. This album also has like a lot of electronic influences. This is kind of when Linkin Park went kind of full into like this kind of like art pop electronic type vibe that they were trying to build out here. And when I first listened to this album, I think that part kind of threw me off, kind of like this whole like, whoa, this is a completely different sound that I wasn't expecting from the Park boys. It's very easy to kind of go, Mike Shinoda's right, he's not the same band that made Hybrid Theory, he's not gonna dance when the beat's funky. I will say there's a track on this record that it really bothers me. It's the track Blackout bothers me because it's really good for like 2/3 of the song. 2/3 of the song is really good, but there's this really weird bridge in there that doesn't really feel like it fits there. I don't know. They try to get a little too experimental with it, but I don't think it turned out really good. But yeah, all that to say, I think this album does fall into the good category for Linkin Park albums. Living Things is another album that I would throw into the good category, because Living Things, I will say, is the best post Metamora album that Linkin Park has made. They kind of go full electro rock type stuff on this record, and I think it brings back a lot of that energy that Hybrid Theory and Metamora had. Not to the fullest extent, but I do think there is a part of this record that has that same sort of essence that those albums had in terms of like just the oomph. And I feel like it has the same oomph that those albums had. We bring the boom! front to back, this album is just full of bangers, and I think they do a good job of like combining everything that like early Linkin Park was good at, while also bringing in new elements to the table. Lies, Greed, and Misery, for example, probably my favorite song off the album. I love the energy and Mike's rapping. The chorus here with Chester's vocals really has that kind of old school Linkin Park energy for me. Roads Untraveled has like some really fun sampling that I feel like is reminiscent of some of the sampling that they did back in Metamora. They sample like this like weird chime thing that they kind of build this beat around. The energy in Until It Breaks and Skin to Skin, absolute fantastic. I love the eclectic energy here, especially in Until It Breaks. There's like this like high pitched like hit that's happening with this like kind of like super heavy 808 that's happening. Eventually the energy like calms down in that song and Chester comes in like a heavenly angel. I feel like with Living Things, they kind of took everything that was really good and worked well with 1,000 Suns and kind of turned it up to 11 and added in some classic Linkin Park elements. In my opinion, at least, I think it turned out really good. Now we're gonna get into the bad. We're gonna put on our hater caps for a quick second here. Minutes to Midnight is fucking awful. Complete sleeper vibes. This is their third album. This is also their first album produced by Rick Rubin, and this is the first time that they kind of tried to branch off of the new metal genre that they were known for. They tried to go like this alternative rock route. I think they did achieve their goal of creating like an alternative rock record, but I think the problem with them like having this goal of creating an alternative rock record, if that even was the goal, was the fact that nothing in this record like stands out as unique to me. It just feels like Linkin Park making an alternative rock record, and it doesn't really help that there's not a lot of standout tracks that would make me want to go back to this album. I will say Bleed It Out is fucking great. I have a lot of nostalgia for this track. I used to listen to this song a lot with my brothers and my dad in the car. Given Up is also, I enjoy the riffs on Given Up, and I think the chorus in this track is also really good. I enjoyed the tracks that Mike was featured in, Hands Held High and In Between. I think another problem that I have with this record, by the way, bringing up Mike Shinoda, is that Mike Shinoda is like nowhere to be found on this record. He's literally just in like 3 of the songs here. I do know that he does a lot of like background vocal work in this album, but I don't think that does him justice, man. If I'm being generous, I think half the album is worth listening to, and the other half of the album is just not worth listening to. And it doesn't help that the album is like 45 minutes long. It's a really long album when it comes to Linkin Park, and they also close out the album with a 6.5 minute song, which I don't know if you ever tried to listen to a 6.5 minute Linkin Park song. It's just not good, man. They should never make another 6.5 minute song. Valentine's Day is also a really bad track. It's one of the worst Linkin Park tracks. I have to skip it every single time. I also feel like this record being their first record with Rick Rubin, who's like this big time producer, I feel like a lot of it comes off a little too polished in my opinion, especially the guitar work, I think. Minutes to Midnight, not good. Hunting Party is also very bad. I think the main problem with Hunting Party is that it's just generally unmemorable to me. Once again, they kind of went this alternative rock route, but they did kind of go a little bit heavier on it. They kind of turned up the metal a little bit on this one. Personally, I just don't find it to be very enjoyable. In fact, I don't think any of these tracks on this record kind of stick out to me in a way that constitutes commentary from me. I will say that All for Nothing is a really dope track, especially in the chorus. I think it is really good. I think this is the best song off of this album. The chorus is really punchy. It reminds me of Rise Against for some reason. I don't really know why. And I will say I also do really like the guitar riff in Mark the Grave, but I think that is where the extent of my love for this record runs dry. I feel like if you are into more of this like kind of heavier metal, you know, heavier rock type stuff, you might enjoy this record a little bit more than me, but I don't think necessarily that is the problem. I just think a lot of the compositions just lacked anything of substance to me that excited me about this project. They also ended it with another 6.5 minute song. Now let's talk about The Ugly. You guys all saw it coming. One More Light. Now, like I said, I will never knock a band for trying something new, but I will knock a band for a failed attempt at something new. And I think that is what this album is right here. First things first, the lyrics on this record aren't bad. I think a lot of the lyrics on this record are actually interesting to listen to, especially after the passing of Chester and the fact that like this album was written so close most of the passing of Chester kind of gives the lyrics like a whole new meaning. Mike Shinoda also has some good lyrics. He has a good song about like fatherhood and stuff. But if an album has good lyrics but like really bad instrumentals, then as someone like myself who listens to music for the instrumentals, that's gonna bring down an album a shit ton. And this is like the most Imagine Dragons looking ass Linkin Park album I could ever fucking imagine, dude. There's not a whole lot of oomph to this record in terms of like the production side of things. I think a lot of the production kind of comes off a little flat to me for some reason. There's a lot of weird vocal chops that are happening here that I don't think really fit the vibe of the album. A lot of critics back in the day when this album first came out criticized Linkin Park for like changing their sound to fit what was popular and fit the mainstream sound. I don't necessarily think that's what they're doing. I think if you look at the trajectory of Linkin Park's career, it makes sense that they would kind of dive into a more electro pop type sound. I don't think they were trying to do it for money or anything like that. I think they're just interested in diving into different genres, but I just don't think it turned out good. I don't think they did a good job at it at all. There's nothing of substance in the album, disregarding the lyrics. Really just the vocal chops and the vocal pitching is really coming across weird to me. I think also Chester unfortunately does drop the ball on some of the melodies on these songs. There's just a lot of weird stuff happening in the production side of this thing that I don't really think turned out to be a good experiment for the band. And that's really all I have to say about it. Now you might be thinking, Kyle, I've noticed that you've mentioned Hybrid Theory and Meteora a lot, but you haven't put it in the good, the bad, or the ugly. Where the fuck are these two albums? Are you just not gonna talk about them? Well, there's a secret category that I didn't tell you guys about. It's the great. All right, we're gonna be talking about the two great albums that Linkin Park has, Hybrid Theory and Meteora, starting with their lesser great album, which is Hybrid Theory. I'm gonna say it right now, man. I don't trust anyone who doesn't like this album, okay? Like I said at the beginning of this video, there's a stigma towards Linkin Park in the sense of like, oh yeah, I used to listen to them when I was younger, but I grew up and I stopped listening to them. I got out of Linkin Park and got into LinkedIn Park. But returning back to this album, it really takes a certain type of maturity to understand that this is just a really good album. I enjoy everything about this album. The heaviness of these guitars, the punchiness of these drums, a shit ton of scratching going in here from DJ Han back in the day, and even still today I feel like it's a pretty unique factor of the fact that we got Mike Shinoda rapping over these like really cool heavy guitars, and we got Chester coming in there with those like screamo-esque lyrics. Like I keep saying throughout this entire video, Chester has such, or I guess had such an incredible talent for writing melodies that just are fucking earworms, man. And there's so many like tiny things that happen in the production of this album that I think are really interesting, that are worth noting, that make this album so unique and is why I enjoy this album so much. We have these like very faint like string stabs that are going on during the sun goes down part of Paper Cuts. It's something that like it's so faint in the mix that I wish was a bit louder, but at the same time it's like it's kind of perfect at the volume it is. There's like these atmospheric synth arpeggio things happening in Points of Authority. There's that like high pitch like synth lead that's happening and With You. Whatever the fuck that sound is and By Myself in the guitar with like whatever the fuck that sound is. Very metallic, very industrial, and I love it. Don't even get me started on A Cure for Itch. This was a hugely pleasant surprise. It's kind of like this like DJ Shadow inspired chopped drum beat that's happening with the like these atmospheric strings and stuff like that. Also the scratching that's happening at the beginning, very sick here. And like I keep saying, I think this the one thing that kind of outshines everything else in this record is Chester's like vocals and his melodies. But honestly, I think everything works together in this album so well, and that's what makes this album so good. I will mention Crawling. You know, some people think that song's cringe, but I will say when you're listening to Crawling as you're running uphill in the rain, it's like the most epic experience ever. So that's Hybrid Theory. Let's get into Meteora. Much like I wouldn't trust anybody who doesn't like Hybrid Theory, I wouldn't trust anybody who doesn't like Meteora more than Hybrid Theory. When this album first came out, a lot of critics called Meteora, you know, Hybrid Theory Part 2, which I think is kind of an insult to this album, to be completely honest with you. It's just an easy argument to make that doesn't provide good analysis for what's actually happening in this album, I feel like. Like, yes, there's a lot of elements of Hybrid Theory in this record, but I think they expand on those elements in ways that make it a more unique album than Hybrid Theory. I personally think that this album kind of blends way more genres and styles into it than what they had in Hybrid Theory. I think Hybrid Theory didn't really bring a lot to the table in terms of meshing genres together. This album I feel like has a whole lot more to offer. I think the choice of sampling and song structuring that's happening here and the layers that are being put together in this album offers a way more dynamic listening experience than Hybrid Theory, and that's why I enjoy it so much. The reverse guitar sample that's playing in the, I forgot the fucking song. That song right off the bat just already shows you that there's a lot more happening than in like the mix and the experimentation than there was happening in Hybrid Theory. The chopped strings that are in Line From You, really sick. And Hit the Floor, there's a percussion sample in there that I don't even know what the fuck it is, but it sounds really cool. There's the iconic string sample and Faint that makes this song like one of the most recognizable songs in their entire discography. And probably my favorite Linkin Park sample ever has got to be the flute and Nobody's Listening. I think it's so sick, and it just has such a nice like hip hop influence to it, and I love the way it's chopped up. Session, once again, is an unexpected DJ Shadow influence type banger, and hate on Numb all you want, but that is actually a perfect way to close an album. I think Numb is actually the best Linkin Park album closer. You combine all those elements of experimentation and dynamicacy, and you combine all of that with like the classic rap vocals from Mike Shinoda and the screaming vocals from Chester Bennington, who also kills it on writing some catchy ass melodies, and you have yourself a classic album here. You got two classic albums back to back. They fucked it with Minutes to Midnight. They came back with 1,000 Suns. They came back harder with Living Things. They fucked it with The Hunting Party. They fucked it hard with One More Light. And hopefully you enjoyed this video. If you did, hit that subscribe button. Follow me on Twitch and Instagram and Twitter.